This is the Jason Walker Show. Two-time National Sports Media Association Montana Sportscaster of the Year and three-time loser, the Jason Walker Show. The best local and statewide sports coverage, featuring the biggest guests from Montana.
Flint Rasmussen joining us here on the Jason Walker Show.
He's freaking exhausting, too. You used to dance a lot more. Yeah, I know, lady. I'm 51 years old now.
The NAI Hall of Famer Mike Van Diest joining us here, Jason Walker Show. And is it just a deal where quarterbacks have to be good golfers?
Well, that's all they have time for. They don't work out. They don't lift weights. They don't do anything else. They might as well go get on the golf course and at least have some fun.
And from across the country,
Doug Gottlieb, our guest here on the Jason Walker Show.
End of the day, remember, it's your show. It's got your name on it.
Howie Mandel, our guest here.
Jason Walker, deal or no deal?
The Jason Walker Show, broadcasting from the Major Mortgage Man Cave. Here's Jason Walker.
Yo, happy, Friday today. Welcome, Jason Walker Show, Major Mortgage Man Cave. Big show coming up today. We got a lot of news from the Frontier, the Big Sky, the FCS, and we're going to break it all down with Sam Herder from Hero Sports FCS coming up in about 15 minutes. Larry Weir, the play-by-play announcer for Eastern Washington, will join us. How does the Big Sky's decision to move to the spring affect Eastern Washington specifically? Because we know of the money issues at EWU and a lot of changes going on over there. So we'll talk to Larry about that coming up. He's one of the best in the business as well. So big show today. You can listen on Podbean, Network One Sports, watch live on YouTube, and also on Twitter and also on Facebook. So we're kind of everywhere here on the Jason Walker Show, which is great for you and me and us. It's all great. Just moving along until we get to the end of the song. On this day in history coming up as well, and the walk-off later at the end of the show. So let's start with our COVID update, because that is what we do each and every day. In the Jason Walker Show, we give us our COVID update, where we are at number-wise in the state of Montana, and our outlook, which doesn't look good, the outlook. 155 new cases, 1,565 active, 3,122 recovered, 70 deaths, and 84 total hospitalizations, and once again falling under 2,000 tests for the day. So 533 in Yellowstone County. Those numbers have dropped a little bit. 50 in Lewis and Clark, 255, Bighorn 180, and the Flathead, I think 94 in Missoula County. So that is where we stand in the state of Montana. All right. And because of COVID, because of everything, the Big Sky Conference, which we talked about this yesterday, we knew it was a foregone conclusion. There was a complete jackwagon on the Twitter from over in Missoula giving a bunch of crap to reputable news people and sports people that knew that this decision was coming. The Big Sky Conference officially moving to the spring today, and in an announcement that came out about 10 o'clock or so this morning. We all expected it. We knew it was coming. And it's done. Now, there are some questions on if there's going to be some non-conference games. Montana State would like to continue. They still have Dixie State on their non-conference schedule. Their two non-conference games were canceled. Long Island and Utah. Utah, the money game. But will Montana be able to play in the fall? Montana State be able to play in the fall? Kent Haslam, director of athletics over at Missoula, said that the Grizz will not play in the fall, no matter what. They're hoping to do some spring ball. And I got to sign up for the Athletic because Jeff Choate, the Bobcat football coach, blasts the NCAA and college football leadership in an Athletic article today. So we'll get that. He is not happy. He was not made available to the media today. We reached out Tuesday. We're still, or Monday rather. We're still waiting to get Coach Choate on the air, as well as Coach Houck. They will be on the show, but obviously both pretty upset. But both saying, you know what, we'll be ready when it's time to play. For Montana State, that could be September 19th against Dixie State at home. They're trying to get along with Idaho, some sort of a 3-game non-conference schedule built. The Missouri Valley came out as well today. And so is it 9 of the 13 FCS classifications and conferences said, we're not going to play in the fall. So now the hope is for football players and coaches on the FCS level that they're going to be an FCS playoff at all, because they got 50%, they're well under the 50% threshold now. And it'll be interesting to keep an eye on it. But they're trying to make a push now to get the FCS playoffs put to the spring. They're going to play the Big Sky according to the Big Sky, a full 8-game conference schedule in the spring. Looking right now, there's no dates, but a lot of it's on the table. There's couple of dates thrown out, March to May, which would be quote-unquote fall camp, your practices, starting in February. Well, that's not going to work so much in the state of Montana. There's no dome facilities to work out in. Idaho State have their domes. Idaho State, by the way, saying they're not even going to allow high school to play in the dome at Holt Arena, and that'll be interesting to see. Eastern Washington, I don't believe, has a domed practice facility to practice in. There's not a lot to do in the Big Sky. So you can weigh in on anything, as always, on the Twitter, on the Facebook, and you can email as well. So just reading some quotes coming out from Jeff Choate, who talked to The Athletic, Bruce Feldman today. Choate sharing his frustration about the starts and stops of workouts this summer during Big Sky Media Day. He also shared it today. But Choate's not happy, and not a lot of people are. But it's the time where we live, folks. This isn't an easy decision for anybody. And, decisions are being made. Here's the big quote that stands out to me. We're going to hear from Big Sky Commissioner Tom Wistersill here in a couple of seconds, but here's a big quote that stands out to me. It's about the health and the safety of the student athletes. Well, if that's the case, then why are you planning a non-conference schedule? You know what I'm saying? Why is it okay to have 3 games, potentially, non-conference games in the fall, but the conference games in the spring? You're either all in or you're all out. If it's me and you move to the spring, you're done in the fall. And just a heads up, this virus is not going to go away by springtime, folks. Be prepared to have no sports again. And I've been saying this. Why don't we just take a year off, reset, come back next May or June, and figure out where we're at? We don't know the numbers of COVID when students come back to campus. Tom Wistersill did a press conference today, the commissioner of the Big Sky Conference. He was asked about the spring and the decision to move Big Sky football to the spring. He was also asked about the testing. And that's what a lot of people that are fans that are freaking out and saying we need to play football, they're not getting the cost that goes into the tests. Okay? You look at Montana, for instance, the state of Montana, where I waited 16 days to get results of a COVID test. 16 days. You can't do tests on college football players and wait 16 days to get results if there's a game that week. And it's a matter of getting the tests. Here's Big Sky Conference Commissioner Tom Wistersill talking about the spring season and testing.
Yeah, I think a lot has to change. Obviously, we have to get control of this virus in this country. We have to make sure that we can, have contact sports in a safe way. I think a lot will be determined by what happens this fall on campuses. Once all the students come back to campus, how can we manage the spread of the virus at each of our locations? And I think we'll learn a lot about each of our local health communities and how they handle it, whether it be testing or any type of vaccine that's available. So it's hard to say here's the 3 or 4 things that have to happen, but there definitely has to be some changes. I mean, if we're in the same place come March that we're in right now, there won't be any college sports going on. Yeah, certainly was a big part of it, kind of a tipping point in some ways, because of, you know, the requirement to do PCR testing for every student athlete that would be practicing or competing every week. That presents a huge challenge to our schools. First of all, from just getting the actual tests in place, getting them back in time, making sure that they're correctly getting the results. I mean, just all of that in all of our institutions in their communities would have been really difficult. And so then you add in the cost of that, and you start thinking about that, you know, times the number of football players you have, volleyball, and all of a sudden it becomes really difficult for us to do that. And we're hearing that around the country, certainly at our level, but also at the FBS level. The challenges of getting tests back in a timely manner has been a real challenge. And so it was certainly a factor that played into it. Maybe a tipping point. It was kind of, we were heading, I think, kind of in this direction based upon lots of things. But then when you start looking at the requirements for testing, that would have been virtually impossible for us to pull off.
Tom Wistersill, the commissioner of the Big Sky Conference, did a Zoom press conference today. There was a lot of media requests, as one would expect, from media members who cover the Big Sky and others from across the country. So there you go. And he talked about it, moving to the spring. And like I've been saying, there's no guarantee that we're going to have football in the spring at all. And then when you come to the testing, like I just said, you wait 16 days like I did for a test. So there's people in Montana that I'm being told that have waited up to 5 weeks to get results from a test. That's unacceptable. You know, I tested negative twice, which is great. I got one test back in a day. The other one took 16 days. And you're talking about, let's say, 100 football players. 25 volleyball players. Multiple cross country. I mean, you see where we're going. The list goes on. And let's not forget, they're going to have to start testing basketball players and wrestlers for these fall sport or winter sports coming up. The requirements the NCAA has put out and the NAI, it's expensive. I will be shocked if the Frontier Conference football players are able to have a full 8-game schedule like they're planning on starting in September. And they moved that back a week to September 19th. Why? How does the Frontier test? Just like the Big Sky. You heard the commissioner of the Big Sky, Tom Wistersill, just talk about it. How does the Big Sky afford a test? A lot of these schools can. And then you drop down to the Frontier schools who make a hell of a lot less money than the FCS teams. Not happening. How are they going to test for high school football? See where I'm going with this? It's not going to be that easy, folks, to where we can just willy-nilly send kids out because, oh, hey, we want to have a football season. We all do. We all want fall sports. Not going to happen. We want winter sports. Well, it's not going to happen either. And I don't know if we're going to play football in the spring. We'll break it down. The Big Sky, the Missouri Valley, the CAA, the entire FCS. Is there going to be FCS playoffs? We'll have all of those questions somewhat answered. When we return, Sam Herder from Hero Sports FCS will join us. There's nobody better than in coverage of the FCS than Sam and his buddy Brian. They broke big news yesterday. They took a lot of heat for it, but at the end, they were right. And Sam Herder joins us next. Jason Walker Show. Have you thought about buying a home and just don't know where to begin? Well, when it comes to one of the most important purchases one can make, we understand it can be frustrating and confusing, but it doesn't have to be. Let the Major Mortgage team help you with all your mortgage needs. Major Mortgage means major service, and we would love the opportunity to help you today. Give J.R. McFadden, NMLS number 1246357, a call today at 406-465-1918, or you can visit him at 2001 11th Avenue, Building A, Suite 3 in Helena. Major Mortgage is a division of AMCAP Mortgage, NMLS number 129122, equal housing lender. Do you love to look at photos of Montana, from animals to landscapes and more? Are you looking for a place to get your senior pictures or family portraits done? Are you a business owner looking to upgrade the decor in your offices? Well, look no further than Mark LaRoe Photography. Mark has been shooting beautiful photos all across the Treasure State, from rodeos to portraits, and would love to work with you. Visit marklaroephotography.com to see many masterpieces of his work, then give him a call to schedule your own photo shoot. Or to purchase one of his fantastic pieces, stop by Spirit of the Big Sky Gallery on Custer in Helena. marklaroephotography.com. Yes, it's true that Montana is a long way from the Gulf Coast, but you can bring that Cajun flavor home with a stop at Cafe Zydeco. From po' boys to classic sandwiches, Cafe Zydeco has all the best Cajun in town. Are you in the mood for seafood gumbo or crawfish etouffee? Maybe you're craving jambalaya with some shrimp and grits. Head in for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or call ahead for pickup or delivery. Cafe Zydeco will fix all your southern cravings, even on a chilly Montana day. Cafe Zydeco is a proud sponsor of The Jason Walker Show.
Who doesn't love being number one? When your team's dominating the standings, or your favorite band rocks the charts at number one, it feels good, right? Kind of like how it feels when you have auto insurance with State Farm. Because making you feel like number one is an honor your local State Farm agent takes seriously. Through the good times and not so good, your State Farm agent's proud to be here to help life go right.
Call State Farm agent Mike Miller in Helena today.
Store-wide savings are what you'll find when you shop for new home furnishings at Rucker's Furniture. This means tremendous values on Helena's largest in-stock selection of home furnishings. When you shop Rucker's, you'll find store-wide savings on the furniture you want for every room in your home. And you'll also find our selection of Serta iComfort, the most comfortable beds in Helena. 12-month financing is available with approved credit on most purchases over $299. Ask for details. You'll find store-wide savings at Rucker's Furniture, 1010 Dearborn, Helena.
More of the Jason Walker Show. Welcome back to the Jason Walker Show.
More coming up. Welcome back. Who knows where we're at? We're in the Major Mortgage Man Cave. I do know that. Jason Walker Show on a finally Friday. Larry Weir, the play-by-play announcer from Eastern Washington, will come join us in about 20 minutes. How does the Big Sky's decision to move to the spring affect Eastern Washington? Specifically because, well, their money is not great as it is. So we'll talk to Larry coming up. Also on this day in history in the walk-off. And Frontier news on the way as well. But I take this time to welcome in our first guest on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. He is he's the best in the business when it comes to covering the FCS. His name is Sam Herder, and he joins us now here on the Jason Walker Show. Sam, how you doing, my bud?
Doing all right. Busy few couple days here, but hanging in there.
I appreciate you joining us. I know you've been all over the media circuit. It feels like you're on you're promoting a book or something. You've been all over this week. I like the media passes behind you though too. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's been doing a handful of radio hits and doing a lot of just swapping some messages. Trying to get the lay of the land. And also I've had a number of FCS players DMing me as well. Just trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and I didn't have a whole lot of answers for them either, unfortunately, but there was a lot of frustration from players trying to get a handle of what's going to happen and try to fill them in with what I knew what was going on, but again there was so much uncertainty these last few days where it was hard to get a handle on everything that was going on.
Sam Herder, our guest here, Mike Miller, State Farm Hotline, joining us on via the Airlink. So the Big Sky, we knew yesterday this was a foregone conclusion. I felt bad, but great job reporting by Brian McLaughlin of Hero Sports, because he nailed it, and you nailed it. Everybody nailed it. We were just a matter of waiting for the official announcement. They finally came out today, but this was expected, and, this isn't the first domino. It's, the 9th of 13. Is that correct?
I believe the Big Sky was conference number 8 to announce that they're postponing. We expect the Valley to announce the same thing, and that would be conference number 9. And then the rest that haven't announced anything yet would be the SoCon, Southland, OVC, and the Big South. So all the teams down south haven't come up with any decisions just yet about the fall season.
But they think they're going to play. I know that James Madison finally postponed that of the CAA. They wanted to do a non-conference schedule, but they came out yesterday and today and said, yeah, we're going to wait and see, because if you're not playing for the playoffs, what is there to play for?
And that's been the interesting part because, you say that, and it is true for a lot of teams. I mean, especially James Madison, when the CAA announced they won't be playing in the fall, at that point, it was still at that point, it was pretty doubtful that we would have the FCS playoffs in the fall, but you never know exactly back then. So, James Madison, I think, did the right thing that said, hey, if the playoffs do happen this fall, we need to be a part of that because we're a top program in the FCS. So as long as the playoffs are, possible, we're going to, remain in contention. And now obviously with the fact that there's less than 50% of playoff eligible teams playing now in the fall, that means no playoffs. That means James Madison has postponed their fall season and will play in the spring. But it is interesting that, take the Southland Conference, for instance. They are extremely motivated to play games this fall. And the Central Arkansas athletic director came out and went on the record in an article that said, even if there isn't playoffs in the fall, if there's no playoffs in the fall, the Southland Conference still wants to play their full season in the fall. And then he went further and said, even if the Southland Conference decides to play in the spring, we still want to play a full season in the fall. So when you say there's nothing to play for if there's no playoffs, that's not the case for a lot of teams out there. It is the case for the top CAA teams and the top, the Valley teams, obviously, and the top Big Sky teams. But Central Arkansas was a playoff seed last year. I think they were the number 8 seed. They ended up losing right away in the second round, but I think they were in our top 10. And for them to say, even if there isn't a playoffs in the fall, we're still going to go ahead and play. I thought that was interesting. Now, we'll see if they actually do play in the fall, just because I think more the kind of the writing is on the wall, in my opinion, that even if some teams do play in the fall, they're probably not going to finish. So I think more than anything, there might be, a team like Central Arkansas might play a couple of non-conference games, get a payday game in there, but then ultimately play the Southland Conference schedule in the spring. I think that's where we're heading with things.
Sam Herder, our guest here, Mike Miller, State Farm Hotline. Sam, when you look at that, there's teams that want to play some non-conference games, especially in the Big Sky, like Idaho, Montana State, in the fall. Why is it safe to play up to 3 games in the fall, but not an entire conference season?
Yeah, that is a good question. It's a fair question. I kind of am along the same lines there, where why can you play some games in the fall but not all the games? I think I haven't been told this directly, but my guess, the reasoning is that, maybe a lot of these FCS teams think they can start the season, but maybe not finish it. Maybe just with flu season, coming up in late October. Another thing too might be the fact that one of the other recommendations by the NCAA Board of Governors, outside of the 50% rule, was you have to test your players every single week, or 72 hours before every single game. And some FCS teams might look at that and say, well, we can't afford to do this every single week, but maybe we can do it for 3 weeks. And we can test every single player before a game 3 times in September. Play 3 non-conference games in September. Maybe collect a payday from a Power 5 team or a Group of 5 team, and then maybe if you're Montana State, for example, trying to get 1 home game into with 30% crowd capacity, that's some revenue coming in just to keep your athletic department chugging along. I think that's kind of the mindset there, but again, that hasn't been told to me directly. But that's the same question I ask myself is, why can some games be played in the fall, but not all the games? But I think that's kind of where the mindset is at there.
I talked about this the beginning of the week and again today. I was out with 2 weeks with no voice literally whatsoever, but I was quarantined. I had COVID test twice. I waited 16 days here in Montana to get 1 COVID test back. It was negative, thankfully. But how did the schools justify using rapid tests to play football when the normal human being like myself or yourself has to wait 2.5 weeks to get results back?
Right, and that's the The testing is the big part too, not only the cost of it, but also just the turnarounds of it. I know, I believe North Dakota has that problem as well. As far as, it's not that there's a lack of tests, it's just that it takes a while to get the turnaround to get the results. So it's the combination of cost and the timeliness of getting those tests. So yeah, that's another interesting kind of dilemma when it comes with sports. About the fact that the NBA can they can test their players every day or whatever it is, and basically find the results out right away. But your everyday Joe Schmoes like you and I haven't gotten a COVID test, so I haven't experienced that, but I know there is delays in just the process. I know someone went to go get a COVID test and the line was too long, so they decided to skip it and go back the next week. And all of a sudden, 3 days later, they got something in the mail saying you tested positive. And they're like, and he's like, I didn't even test. What are you guys talking about? Yep. So just the whole testing thing is kind of a mess, which just kind of goes back to my thought that the right now teams are saying they're motivated to play in the fall, but I don't know. I think some games will happen in the fall, but I don't think there's going to be a full season played in the fall.
Yeah, I just don't see it happening on any of the 13 FCS conferences or the FBS for that matter. D2, D3 already canceled their fall sports championships, which tells me that they're not going to try to play a fall sports football season either, or any of their fall sports. It's an uncertain time, as Sam Herder, our guest here from Hero Sports FCS. Sam, when you look at this last couple of days, the decisions that came down from, the Pioneer, the Big Sky, the CAA, we're supposed to hear from the Valley maybe later today. Those are some big players. We knew the Ivy League was first. They were also the first to cancel their basketball tournament, so maybe they are smarter than everybody else. But you look at the CAA was, a few weeks ago, and now all of a sudden you got more of the bigger players moving to the spring. Does that give us hope that there's going to be a playoff system in the spring, or is that going to get scrapped, do you think?
Well, I think, the Big Sky has, they're trying to unify everything right now as far as, really pushing hard and collaborate and unify with the other FCS conferences and the NCAA to, try to figure out some way to get an FCS spring playoff, to happen, because we haven't really, no one has come out within the NCAA or leadership that said if there isn't an FCS fall championship, there is for sure going to be a spring FCS championship. No one's, said that is going to happen. Right. So I think, the Big Sky, I think in their press release, they said, we're already actively talking to other FCS conferences to, kind of have a uniform front to go to the FCS and say we're all on board here. Well, the problem is, like I mentioned earlier, the Southland wants to play this fall, and the OVC and the SoCon as well. They seem pretty motivated to play this fall. So, we'll see what happens, with the spring. First off, obviously things have to improve by then just to play games.
Sure.
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. That will happen. Hopefully, active cases are down, so the worry about an outbreak happening is down, and hopefully testing gets cheaper, and there's treatments, and maybe a vaccine. We'll see, but I do think they will have a season in the spring. It's just a matter of how will they structure that FCS playoffs. How late will the playoffs go into May or June? Probably May, and then how will that impact the fall of 2021, and then also how many seniors that have pro aspirations, how many of them are going to decide to just forego their senior year and train for their upcoming pro day if there is a spring season. So a lot of questions, but I think athletic departments are going to have a lot of time this fall, obviously with no games going on, to put a plan in place, and hopefully we can get something together that works for the spring.
We saw a player from Northern Iowa, one of the first dominoes to say he's entering that transfer portal and, not going to play in the spring, possibly. But, there's a lot of guys like Trey Lance from NDSU that came out and said, look, we got big dreams, aspirations. We want to play in the league too. It'd be interesting to see how many players don't play in the spring. You bring up the playoffs, Sam, the potential of it running into June. They always talk about the commissioners, the ADs, the presidents have all talked about the last couple months, the health and safety of the student athletes. How in the heck can you justify running a playoff deep into May or June and then turn around in August and come back for the health and safety of the players to have a 2021 season?
Right, and I think that's why the 2021 season would probably get pushed back to October. But even then, that's not a normal amount of break there.
Right.
But I mean, still, I mean, to use NSU as an example, they've played into January every year in the 2010s, except for a couple of years. And then they've, had 1 week off, went right into their grueling, off-season workout with their strength coach. And then, 2 months after the season ends, they go into, spring football. And then they, take a break, and then they go into summer workouts,
Right.
and then they go right into the season. So NDSU is kind of an example of how you can play a 16-game schedule, then 2 months later play spring ball, which I mean obviously isn't. I mean you're a lot of your upperclassmen aren't practicing in the spring or going high-level padded contact in the spring. But I do think players could possibly play until May, and then start in October. I do think there is circumstances, especially with the 4-game redshirt rule. Where maybe there is a play counts somehow in spring football where players can only play X amount of plays in a game, and you kind of sprinkle in some true freshmen playing in 4 games to maintain their red shirts. I mean, something like that where you try to save up on snaps and turn around and play in the fall. But yeah, you're right. That is the main, or not the main concern, but one of the bigger concerns is how does this impact the fall of 2021? Because if we can't play until the October of 2021, well, the September is when a lot of pay games are for these FCS teams. So yeah, a lot of questions still to be answered.
What's crazy is I think back to, and I've told this story on the air before. It was 5 or 6 years ago, and I was at Goodwill dropping off some stuff. I had moved in with the girlfriend, and the guy that was taking my donations found out I worked in sports, and he said, sports as we know it will not look the same in 5 to 10 years. And little did I know, I thought he was a whack job, but little did I know how right he actually has turned out to be. It's nuts when you think about it, and not just, we talk FCS football because it's huge. How many schools are going to suffer now and possibly not even be able to make it without that football budget?
Yeah, I think I don't know if there's going to be a lot, but I think there might be some teams that decide to either drop their football program or to drop a division. Maybe even some might drop to the Pioneer Football League because the Pioneer Football League is non-scholarship. I believe just recently Presbyterian was a Big South member. They're now going to the Pioneer Football League, and that's, you're saving up on 63 scholarships right there. So I think there is going to be some stuff like that. But the FCS is so interesting in the fact that you have teams like James Madison and NDSU and the Montana schools where, the football program generates a lot of revenue for them, just with the amount of donations and season tickets and just ticket revenue in general. But then you have the other extreme where there's very, very small athletic budgets, and there's these football teams that cost their schools and their athletic departments, millions of dollars just to operate a football program. So I feel like some of those teams might have already been hanging on their Division I status. It's been hanging on by a thread. I feel like this might be the final nail where the school really goes. How they go, how worth it is it to have our football team be Division I? And should we drop a division? Should we drop football entirely? Just because it is such a money pit. So I do think there will be some teams that drop football or drop a division. I just don't know if it's going to be, like 20 or 30 teams. I don't think it's going to be that much. But there's going to be some teams and athletic departments in general that are going to be hurting after this.
Sam, I got to know, do you always grow a beard in the off season, or is this just because there's nothing to do right now?
No, you should have saw me in April. The beard is coming out a little more thick. I had some quarantine hair where my hair was flowed back, so I'm cleaned up a little bit better than what I was in April. But I have I have nowhere to be. I have no one to see, except for on the computer. So, kind of let myself go a little bit, maybe.
Kind of the way I feel. I went with the mustache look, which the wife hates. But, it's. Are you married yet?
Nope. I just have a living girlfriend right now. So, no rings just yet.
Okay, just making sure, because we talked about it the last time you were on, so I want to make sure. Hey, appreciate the appreciate the knowledge. You're the best to go to, and I know you've been all over the state, but appreciate it as always. Do you deep down, Sam? Final question: will we have football in the spring?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
What do you think we'll be playing football in the spring?
I think so. Yeah, I think they'll. Hopefully, we're at a place in this country where we can, and things kind of look a little bit better. And I do think, these Valley, these Big Sky teams, they need to, and all the other FCS teams, they need to get some football games in this spring. So I do think we'll be playing in the spring.
Well, I hope so, man, because I'd love to read your coverage, not just here's not just the bad news. I want some good news from you guys once in a while, all right?
Well, that's usually what we try to do. We try to be positive about our coverage and highlight the players and the teams and the coaches and all that. We're usually not really the scoop game, great news game with the FCS, with everything that's going on. We've got some connections that we trust where we're able to kind of share what's been going on.
Yep. No, you definitely
hopefully
do.
we got some Larry features pretty soon.
Awesome, Sam. I appreciate it, man, and stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you once again.
That is Sam Herder joining us on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline, courtesy of Airlink. And Sam is, you can follow him at Hero Sports FCS, man, because he is flat out awesome and does a great job covering the FCS and everything that's involved. It's so awesome to watch what Sam and FCS Hero Sports FCS do. They're so good at it. Brian McLaughlin broke the news yesterday. He was right, despite what the jerk over in Missoula wanted to think on social media. But they were right, and we appreciate Sam joining us here today. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we know that the FCS teams need money, and they rely on football for a lot of that, like Sam said, scholarship, donations, season tickets, just in general. Football makes a lot of the money for a university or a college. And Eastern Washington is struggling, and they have been for quite some time. We're going to talk to play-by-play announcer Larry Weir. How does the Big Sky Conference decision to move to the spring affect Eastern Washington specifically, and what's it mean for the Big Sky? We will talk to Larry Weir when we come back next here on The Jason Walker Show.
Store-wide savings are what you'll find when you shop for new home furnishings at Rucker's Furniture. This means tremendous values on Helena's largest in-stock selection of home furnishings. When you shop Rucker's, you'll find store-wide savings on the furniture you want for every room in your home. And you'll also find our selection of Serta iComfort, the most comfortable beds in Helena. 12-month financing is available with approved credit on most purchases over $299. Ask for details. You'll find store-wide savings at Rucker's Furniture, 1010 Dearborn, Helena.
Yes, it's true that Montana is a long way from the Gulf Coast, but you can bring that Cajun flavor home with a stop at Cafe Zydeco. From po' boys to classic sandwiches, Cafe Zydeco has all the best Cajun in town. Are you in the mood for seafood gumbo or crawfish etouffee? Maybe you're craving jambalaya with some shrimp and grits. Head in for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or call ahead for pickup or delivery. Cafe Zydeco will fix all your southern cravings, even on a chilly Montana day. Cafe Zydeco is a proud sponsor of The Jason Walker Show. Have you thought about buying a home and just don't know where to begin? Well, when it comes to one of the most important purchases one can make, we understand it can be frustrating and confusing, but it doesn't have to be. Let the Major Mortgage team help you with all your mortgage needs. Major Mortgage means major service, and we would love the opportunity to help you today. Give J.R. McFadden, NMLS number 1246357, a call today at 406-465-1918. Or you can visit him at 2001 11th Avenue, Building A, Suite 3 in Helena. Major Mortgage is a division of AMCAP Mortgage, NMLS number 129122, equal housing lender. Do you love to look at photos of Montana, from animals to landscapes and more? Are you looking for a place to get your senior pictures or family portraits done? Are you a business owner looking to upgrade the decor in your offices? Well, look no further than Mark LaRoe Photography. Mark has been shooting beautiful photos all across the Treasure State, from rodeos to portraits, and would love to work with you. Visit marklaroephotography.com to see many masterpieces of his work, then give him a call to schedule your own photo shoot. Or to purchase one of his fantastic pieces, stop by Spirit of the Big Sky Gallery on Custer in Helena. marklaroephotography.com.
Welcome back to the Jason Walker Show.
Welcome back on a finally Friday inside the Major Mortgage Man Cave. This segment brought to you by marklaroephotography.com. Check him out. And if you purchase any of Mark's fantastic works, including the one behind me that was taken on July 3rd at the NRA Rodeo, you get 20% off by mentioning the show. If you book a family or senior portrait package, you'll get a free 8x10 canvas or matte print as well. So go to marklaroephotography.com. On this day in history coming up, we'll wrap up the week as well, the walk-off and a whole lot more. But want to welcome in our next guest on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. He is a longtime great play-by-play announcer for Eastern Washington. His name is Larry Weir, and he joins us now here on the Jason Walker Show. Larry, how's your summer been?
Well, it's pretty boring, actually, Jason. To tell you the truth, it's it's a nice day today, I guess, and we've got some news and finally some finality of what's going to happen or not happen, I guess, in this case, in the fall. Yeah,
it's an absolute not stunner. I think we all saw it coming. It was announced officially today, but with the Big Sky moving to the spring, this is a big deal. And you know, we talked to Sam Herder from Hero Sports, who does a great job, and just a moment ago. But you know, we don't know yet if we're even going to have a football playoff yet with the FCS. But this is just unprecedented times, and I know none of us have ever seen anything like this. But how much did you know that this was going to be coming leading up to yesterday?
I was a little bit surprised, actually, Jason. I thought the Big Sky that enough schools would be able to play that they would go ahead and say we're going to give it a shot. And then if others ended up having to drop out, then maybe you make some kind of differential. But as I understand it, 8 schools had clearance to go ahead and practice, and so I thought maybe they would have a go at it. Eastern was one of those schools that could not at this point in time practice. And you know, I think probably in the end it was a good decision by the conference, because it would have been very debilitating to an Eastern or to a Portland State or to any of the California schools if they weren't able to participate this year while other schools were.
Yeah, and that's another thing, too. When you look at the California schools, I mean, we've known for a couple of months that they weren't going to probably be able to play at all because of the California school system. And then the situation in Oregon, the situation isn't any better yet in Washington. And it's getting worse in Montana. So I think you saw the writing on the wall. Eastern Washington laid some new turf on the Inferno. What does this mean, though, Larry? Because with Eastern Washington struggling so much financially, academia for a couple years has wanted athletics gone completely or cut down drastically. The president of Eastern just quit this week or resigned. What's this mean specifically for Eagles athletics?
That's a good question, Jason. Really, nobody at this point in time, can really answer that question. Or if they can answer that question, they don't really want to at this point. I think a lot will depend on what happens if we get to the spring season, and then how many fans can attend, et cetera. Right now, Eastern's looking, they had a better than $2 million budget shortfall. They had to cut a lot of things out of their budget. Then when you add in football, you lose $750,000. And let's say you net 600 or 625 out of that trip to Florida. Mm-hmm. And then you've got, whatever your season ticket and ticket money would have been for an unprecedented home schedule with both Montana and Montana State, plus Idaho and Weber State, all coming to Cheney in conference play. So you were looking probably at, 1 million, 1.25, maybe even 1.5 million in ticket sales for the 6 home games that Eastern had, which would have been a record in that as well. So if you end up losing out on all that money plus the Florida money, it could be, a huge blow if the university isn't willing to, at least give a short-term loan to the athletic department to try to get through the pandemic, and we haven't even figured out yet with men's basketball. Eastern plays $275,000 to $300,000 a year in guarantee games. That's also added to the budget, and so that could be an additional crippling blow. So I don't think anybody really wants to take on that question yet until we know at the end of the school year. I'll say in late May or early June of 2021 exactly what can be played and what can't as far as Eastern goes.
When you look at the potential, Larry, of having a spring football season and starting, let's talk about the Montana schools, the Idaho schools, not so much Idaho, but, you get a lot of snow in that Cheney, Spokane area, and it doesn't exactly stay necessarily warm, but how will they be able to have a practice in January or February and then play games in March and April when it's still, we just don't know what the weather's going to be like, and it's typically not great.
No, exactly. But is it going to be that much worse than a November or a December practice if the team is in playoff time at that point? So, I think the football players will be able to get through that. It might not be ideal. Obviously, you'd like to have better weather. But then again, the weather should improve as you go through the year rather than get worse as you go through the year. So I would hope that how they work this is start practice at some point in February, maybe whether it's the first part of February or toward the mid part, and the season would then kick in with maybe the second Saturday in March, and you play through April, and then you'd have playoffs in May is how I would hope it would all work out here. And so by the time the games start, I would think the weather should be, you never know what you're going to get in this area, whether it's in Montana or in Eastern Washington, but I would think for the most part it should at least be reasonable, like a November home game when we get to that point at the very least.
Larry Weir joining us on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline, does play-by-play for Eastern Washington. With the spring season and the potential of playoffs running until, through May, potentially into June, and then you turn around and come back in August, they talk about the health and safety of the student-athlete being first and foremost through this pandemic. But if you run a playoff system into late May and you make that playoff run, and then you turn around and come back in August, there's a whole lot of questions as far as the health and safety of that. But then will the upperclassmen play? Will the stars play in the spring? There's a lot of question marks still.
Oh, a huge amount of question marks. And you hit the nail right on the head on two things. Number one, we're already starting to see some of the FCS stars enter the transfer portal. Northern Iowa wide receiver just entered in to the portal. Villanova's had some guys. JMU, they've lost 2 or 3 key guys, so they will not be available in the springtime. Now, they may not end up having a home to play. We'll have to wait and see because there's only so many, FBS scholarships as well, unless guys are willing to pay their own way and walk on. So that's going to be one thing to monitor. And then I think you just mentioned it too, with the season potentially lasting into the Memorial Day or the first week of June, however they work it. How can you literally ask those kids who have just played 16, 17, 18 weeks of college football to sit out for 8 weeks and then go play another 17 or 18 weeks of college football, counting practice time? I think when you start looking at that 40 to 45 week period, if you're going to make these kids play 30 to 32 of those weeks, that's a little bit much, in my opinion. I don't see how that is part of the health and safety of a student athlete. But at the same point in time, it's I think it was the last choice that schools had to make, and I think that's where they ended up. It would be the school has to play the games in order to get the money. Montana and Montana State, if they can't play a home game, you're looking at Montana's a $400,000 loss or thereabouts, and Montana State's probably in the $300,000 range, or maybe even a little bit more than that on both cases. So the schools have to be able to, I think Montana's more like 600,000. I think now that I think about it, but at any rate, whatever the money is, you've got to be able to have that money in order to be able to operate as an athletic department. And it may end up being bad for some kids, but still, I guess worse for the kids would be if you couldn't afford the athletic department at all and you started to see football programs disappear because of this.
Larry, one thing that I've been bringing up, and nobody's been able to answer this, and you won't be able to either, but we just saw the tragic news yesterday, a football player from Puyallup that passed away from COVID-related situation or disease. And to me, it's not the death total. It's not even really the numbers totals. It's the long-term effects. We don't know what the long-term effects are of this COVID disease yet. And we've seen some deaths. We've seen, a Boston Red Sox player who's 27 that has heart issues. We saw the 19-year-old kid in Indiana, offensive lineman, had COVID, and now he's got heart issues. We don't know the long-term effects. And to me, it's not worth throwing our kids out there, whether it's high school, college, youthful, or whatever, until we know more. What's your opinion on that?
I would agree with you. I mean, we just, at this point in time, you just don't know what if you get a bad enough case of this, you're talking about potential heart issues, you're talking about potential lung issues, you're talking about, any number of things, and we just don't understand enough about this virus. And we, meaning the epidemiologists and the people that study this, they just don't know yet exactly what's going on. And frankly, I think that's still going to be a problem when we get to the spring. I think what everybody's hoping for is there's some kind of a vaccine that's available, but if there aren't enough doses to go around to everybody, is a college student going to be ahead in line over a healthcare worker or ahead of an elderly person who is at a higher risk or a teacher or something along those lines? Are those kids going to be in line ahead of some of these other people in trying to get this vaccine? So, I think what we've done here is just put off a decision for a while, and you're hoping that in 4 or 5 or 6 months, something better is going to be down the line. But, we're not 100% sure of that either. And what the NCAA mandated this week, along with their testing, but they also said that, hey, we don't think you should be playing any sports here. We're not going to tell you you can't play any sports, but if you do play, then you are going to be responsible for the medical, any out-of-pocket medical costs that your players have. That was part of the deal that they put in this week, and that's, I think, why, in part, the Big Sky decided not to go forth with a football season. I'll be very surprised if they go forth with a volleyball or a soccer or a cross-country season this fall, and we'll see about basketball this winter. Yeah. If they're going to be on the line for any future, at least in the near term, health costs of the student athletes who may get sick because of this.
You also bring up the testing too, and I've said this earlier in the week. I missed 2 weeks. I didn't have a voice. I got COVID tested on the 20th of July. I waited 16 days to get a result. Why are football players or student athletes, guaranteed to get their results back in less than 72 hours, but the normal Joe Schmo like myself has to wait 16 days? And I think that's a big question and a big concern of a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. It's as I understand it, some of the testing facilities will enter into contracts, and so maybe somebody's entered into a contract with the NCAA, and so they become a high priority deal. So that you jump to the front of the pack there because they're guaranteeing you X number of tests and paying you probably millions of dollars to be able to do this over the course of the season. So obviously you jump to the front of the line ahead of the schmo in Montana who's, had to have a test, or the guy in Eastern Washington has had to have the test, but it's just an individual person. So that's a big part of it too. I mean, I don't think that you can guarantee the return of the testing within 72 hours of competition. I'm just not sure if you test guys on Wednesday, you can get that back by Friday if you have to go on a chartered airplane to go someplace.
Now, there's so many unquestioned questions or unanswered questions that we just don't know. And to me, I've been saying this, Larry, and I'm going to stand by this. And it's not a COVID fear mongering type thing, but let's just reset and pause for a year and then come back in 2021. And I know there's a lot of logistics behind that, but we've never dealt with anything like this. And the student athletes have never dealt with anything like this. And to me, it's safer to just pause and figure things out and then possibly prepare for hopefully a fall of 2021.
I think that's a reasonable thought, that it would be probably the safest way to go. I just don't know that there'd be that many athletic departments that would survive to get to that point. So you might see the the ruination of that point of college athletics. That's kind of the thing that we've got to balance here. You've got to balance the health of the student athletes. You've got to balance the financial, part of the universities. You've got the television networks that are putting pressure on that they need programming, and they're paying money, and they don't want to pay the money if they don't get the programming.
True.
So there's so much right now to try to balance, and I don't think there's any one ideal answer to the whole thing. And I think you have to, kind of feel your way in the dark and hope you don't stub your toe, or and if you do stub your toe, then you don't break your toe, I guess.
Will there be? I mean, do you feel confident that there'll be a basketball season?
I don't, to be honest. And I think that if there is a basketball season, it's going to be entirely without fans. And if there is a basketball season again, it'll be because there has to be an NCAA tournament. But the NCAA is going to have to ease up on these regulations a little bit with the testing and with the liability in order for a lot of the smaller conferences and a lot of the smaller schools to be able to afford this. And I don't know that you've seen it, Jason. I haven't seen the whole article yet, but Jeff Choate was quoted by Bruce Feldman in The Athletic today. There was a big article, and I'm dying to go and read that.
Yep, me too.
Where Choate really took the NCAA to task, and I think he's probably, if the headlines of it is how the story reads, then I think he's struck quite a blow for the NCAA, or for the smaller schools with the NCAA. I would hope that maybe it opens an eyeball or two in Indianapolis.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that need answered, and we're not going to find anything out today. But you and I are going to keep trying to solve them all, because that's what our job is. Of course, you actually get to I feel for the play-by-play announcers that are gearing up for a season, and now you don't have one, and I feel for you guys.
Yeah, I know one colleague has already lost his job today because of all this. Man. So, it's a tough time for a lot of people. So, we'll manage to soldier on here, but my heart goes out to everybody that's been affected, by this, and hopefully everybody else that's going, whether it's a sports talk show like yourself or other people, that they are able to do so with as little dislocation as possible.
Well, Larry, I appreciate the time, and I was looking forward to seeing you out in Spokane, but everything got changed a little bit, and maybe next year we'll be able to get together. But look forward to getting you back on the show. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. Anytime you need me.
That is Larry Weir, the Eastern Washington play-by-play announcer, joining us on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. Yeah, a lot of unknowns, and you feel for guys like play-by-play announcers that now, like Larry said, losing their jobs because there's no sports to talk about. And it's a worry that I have daily is where does this show go if there's no fall sports? Well, we know there's not going to be college sports. What about high school? I don't know if high school is going to be able to happen either in the state of Montana. And I hate to say it, but it doesn't look great. But that's where we're at, folks. And we just don't know. There's so many unknowns. And appreciate Larry and Sam Herder for joining us today here on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. And like I said, it's tough. It is tough. Today is August the 7th, 2020. It is International Beer Day. It is National Water Balloon Day as well. On this date in 1936, 22 nations lined up. The first basketball competition in the Olympics in Berlin. Estonia beat France in the very first game. 1948, American Alice Coachman became the first black woman from any country to win an Olympic gold medal. She took the high jump in London. 1954, Roger Bannister beat John Landy in the mile at the Empire Games in Vancouver. Why is that important? Well, it's the first time that two men would run a mile in less than 4 minutes in the same race. 1956, Red Sox slugger Ted Williams fined $5,000 for spitting at heckling Boston fans. Now, also in 1956, Satchel Paige, 51 years young, playing for the Miami Marlins, won a game before the largest crowd in minor league history, 57,000. 1984, the U.S. collected its first Olympic gold medal in women's basketball at the Olympics, a win over South Korea. 1999, Wade Boggs became the first player to hit a home run for his 3,000th hit. I think, did Jeter do the same thing? A couple of guys not known for hitting home runs. 2004, Greg Maddux won his 300th career game. And 2007, on this date, Barry Bonds hit his 756th home run. Steroid jacked up cheating home run to beat Hank Aaron. Happy birthday, Don Larson, born on this date in 1929, the only perfect game in World Series history. He passed away last year. And Sid the Kid, Sidney Crosby, was born on this date in 1987. Do you remember where you were 23 years ago today? It was 1997. Were you at Central Park for Garth Brooks' free concert? Over 1 million people live at Central Park for Garth Brooks. How cool was that? It was a great show. And he had a lot of fun. Let's do this.
We're almost at the end of the show. What did we learn? And what did he miss? Time for the walk-off.
All right, time for the walk-off. And one thing we didn't get to, but we are going to, is that the Frontier Conference came out today and said that they're going to push football back. They're still planning on playing. They're still planning on playing the 5 Montana schools in a 8-game conference season, and we'll see. But they delayed a week to start the games from the 12th of September to the 19th. This delay was recommended by league administrators to give returning students more time to adjust to new health protocols. Okay, which means we're going to keep pushing this back because we don't know how many of our students, period, are going to get COVID when they come back to campus in 2 weeks. And the answer to that is a ton. Volleyball, so this is the big announcement, and I think we're going to have Carroll volleyball coach Mo Boyle on this show Monday, but at this time, volleyball administrators, Frontier administrators, moving volleyball to the spring to accommodate all schools in the Frontier and to further align the sport with the NAIA championships, which have been moved to the spring. Here's the big thing. A lot of this was due to the fact that the University of Providence is going online only to start the fall, which means they won't be doing fall sports, cross country, golf, volleyball at the University of Providence. So the interesting question to me on that, on the Frontier being all-inclusive for its volleyball schools, they didn't seem to care too much about the football schools, College of Idaho, Southern, and Eastern Oregon. Remember, the Cascade said they were moving all fall sports to the spring. That included their football teams. The Frontier wants to go ahead with a football season without those 3, 2 of which have been powerhouses in the last couple of years. Well, all 3, really. Eastern Oregon made a very deep run. Southern Oregon, of course, has won a national championship and reached the finals and the semifinals recently. And then, of course, College of Idaho last year ran the table in the Frontier and made a deep run in the playoffs. So why are those schools not as important as the University of Providence's volleyball team, which won the Frontier last year and made a good run at the national tournament? You can't be all-inclusive in one and not the other. Cascade included its soccer programs from the Frontier. Why are they not including Frontier and not including Cascade football? It's a big question. There's a lot of questions on that, and it's interesting to follow. So, there you go. Walk-off brought to you by Cafe Zydeco, 625 Euclid. I think I'm going to try to talk the wife into getting some breakfast beignets tomorrow. Maybe some catfish tonight. Who knows? Or I'll probably just cook. Great guests all week. Sam Herder, Larry Weir today, Dave Thorvalson, Cy Miller, who pitched the no-hitter. State Legion going on. Bozeman and Helena play tonight in the undefeated semifinal. NAI President Jim Carr, John Burnett, Kent Paulson joining us. Next week, Kyle Mihelish, Scott Evans, Amanda Robertson, golf pro, just to name a few. I'll leave you with this for the weekend. At the end of today, remember this. You can move all the sports to the spring all you want. This virus is not going to go away, though, by the spring. And we're not going to be playing football in the spring either. I don't think we're going to have basketball, and I don't think we're going to have football at any point. Hopefully I'm wrong. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday at 4. If you miss anything, go to jasonwalkershow.com.
The Jason Walker Show is produced by the Jason Walker Media Company. Any reuse, rebroadcast, or retransmission without the express written consent of the Jason Walker Show is strictly prohibited. Just listen, watch, and enjoy.